Penn State isn't just generating local buzz. No, they're getting plenty of respect on the national scale.
You are Locked On College Crossover, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
You are locked on to Penn State football, and thank you so much for checking out this crossover edition between Locked On Nittany Lions and Locked On College Football. My name is Seyko, and I am your host of Locked On Nittany Lions, credentialed media member for both Penn State football and Penn State wrestling. He is Spencer McLaughlin, host of Locked On College Football, Locked On Ducks. You see him with the Big Ten squad. He is going to be our neutral arbiter here for Penn State.
Good word choice.
Yes.
Good word choice there, Seyko.
You were boots on the ground at Big Ten Media Days, and this is what we picked up here is that, okay, it's not just in a bubble. Penn State is getting respect locally, but also on the national scale as well. That was your biggest takeaway, and you think they're going to go 12-0, so we're going to begin there, but then compare and contrast them to Ohio State. You cover the Ducks, so we're going to talk about Oregon as well. And Penn State, well, Indiana's not alone. Penn State is also guilty of scheduling too many cupcake games. We're going to talk about why that's actually not a bad decision by either Penn State or Indiana. First, beginning with the fact that, okay, Penn State is getting the respect that they deserve. They're in the mix for a national title. I'm not saying they're the perennial favorite, but they are definitely one of the teams that will be most likely standing at the end of the season. Them and Ohio State, I think Oregon has a case there, but Spencer, the Penn State people, the Penn State side of things, this is now extending where the general public is buying into the Nittany Lions.
Yeah, and being down there and just talking to folks from all over the country that cover the sport, I heard a lot of discussions about preseason Big Ten media polls and about who you think is winning the conference, national title favorites, and time and again, I hear Penn State coming up, and I'm glad to hear that because I've been beating this drum all off season, Seyko, that I think all of the pressure should be on James Franklin and the Nittany Lions. I think all the expectations should be there. And I don't think that it should ever be as simple of an analysis as here's James Franklin's record in top 10 games. Okay. I'm not saying that shouldn't ever come up in the conversation. But what I've found is that's where the conversation ends. For a lot of people. Nope, it's Penn State in big games. They won't do that. I heard that about Jim Harbaugh at Michigan for a long time with regards to Ohio State. Look at his record in rivalry games. Oh my goodness, he's 1-6 or 7. He's 2-8 in the rivalry games. How'd that work out? Pretty well. I think Michigan fans would say it went pretty well. And you can throw all the Connor Stallion stuff aside and still be able to realize, okay.
That was still objectively an elite team. That was still a really good team.
100%.
They didn't need to cheat, but allegedly they did.
Oh, yeah. Right? No, there were lines were crossed to be sure, but then he went away and what do you know, they still went out and won games. But they beat Ohio State, what was it, 4 years in a row under Jim Harbaugh? 3, or now it's 4 years in a row. To say that just because you haven't seen something happen in college football means it never will, I think is a short-sighted conversation, and it's a short-sighted take, because when you look at just what Penn State did last year, Zach, the 2 games that they lost in the regular season, including the Big Ten championship game, Oregon, number 1 team in the country for most of the season and going into the playoff, they lost by how many points? 7. Ohio State.
8, technically. Don't mean to split hairs.
Was it 45-37? Oh, it was 45-37. That's right.
Don't mean to split hairs.
Okay, 8 points. Ohio State, eventual national champions. They lost by, how many points was it? 7. Mm-hmm. So are we going to sit there and pretend Penn State was so far away that their team that was really good was just light years behind Oregon and Ohio State last year? To do that is foolish. Notre Dame in the semifinal. No, they didn't get over the hump. I'm not trying to tell you that it should have happened. No, they came up short in those particular moments. But again, Notre Dame was in the national championship game and Penn State lost by 3 points.
And
so you've got
frankly,
three
one
losses.
throw away from winning
Right.
that game.
One throw, one play away from winning the football game. So do I think that it's fair to bring up how James Franklin has performed in those games? Yes. And I mean, myself and others asked him about it at Big Ten Media Days, and he said, we're not trying to, run away from it. We're not trying to hide from that fact. Like, we know we can get better. We also want to point out and appreciate the fact that, where the program was when we took it over was different than where it is now, where we're the envy of 99% of the sport, which they are, by the way. You know how many athletic directors would love to have Penn State's football record in year in and year out? Right now, most of them, the only ones that wouldn't are the ones that are trying to win a national championship, and Penn State is very much in that conversation. So, he pointed that out while also saying, yeah, we do still have room to improve. He didn't tie the ball, and he said we just be better situationally, play good football. I think they're in their best position they've been in my lifetime to go out there and win the Big Ten. That's why I'm predicting them to go 12-0.
You make a lot of good points, Spencer.
That's what they pay me for.
Stop making so many good points here between that. Teams like Pitt, Maryland, West Virginia, all those teams would love to be in Penn State's position and try to dunk on the Nittany Lions because they come up short by 3 points in the college football semifinals when those schools wouldn't even sniff that part of the season at this point in time. Penn State, situationally, yes, I think definitely needs to be better. Let's also point to the fact that, okay, James Franklin he's not holding a video game controller. He is not dictating those outcomes in those close moments. Those were different staffs. Those were different teams. And college football, by proxy, is always going to have such massive turnover. But now Penn State is in a much better position where if you compare them to those teams that 10-2 and didn't, they couldn't win that big game. Different coordinators, different players. You now have Jim Knowles, the best defensive coordinator in all of college football. Andy Kotelnicki, top 10, conservatively a top 10 offensive coordinator. They might be the you say top 5.
Yeah.
I'm trying to be a little more, there are people that say, well, Andy Kotelnicki's definitely outside of the top 10. He's 12, whatever. That's fine. I think he's a top 5 OC. And Jim Knowles is definitely the best defensive coordinator. With that being said, you now have this power duo at 2 important coordinator spots that didn't always have the best candidate there that James Franklin has wanted. So now if they fall short of expectations, Spencer, it is justified to really criticize James Franklin and what this team, because, okay, yeah, they had Manny Diaz, they got Tom Allen, but before that, Mike Yurcich wasn't their top OC choice once upon a time. They've always been, they've never had that ability to go out and get those top tier coordinators, make these kinds of pushes in the transfer portal to go get premium players at premium positions of need. So now there are no excuses. So 12-0, I'm glad you see it that way, and we'll get your final response before we go through the entire Big Ten and how Penn State stacks up.
Yeah, I think with Kotelnicki, I would love to meet the person who is going to bring me 10 offensive coordinators I would rather have than him. I don't know where those guys are. I'm not saying there aren't other really, really strong ones out there, but 10 better than him? I don't think so. I don't know. I don't think you could give me 5.
He does so much more with less.
Yeah, and remember, this is a guy who's going to be a head coach in about an hour and a half. So that's metaphorical, just to be clear. Don't raise the alarm bells
Flip
there,
it.
Penn State fans. Yeah, the coordinator move is a big part of it for me. I was talking on the other day on my show about Miami's record for the year, and I like Miami's offseason. They attacked their weakness on defense, brought in some players, got new defensive staff. I'm not as bullish on the Hurricanes as I am on the Nittany Lions, even though they also have a veteran quarterback who I like in Carson Beck, because number one, he's new to that system. Number two, he's got an injury concern. But number three, they bring over the defensive coordinator from Minnesota. Sneaky nice move, by the way.
That was a top 10 defense.
Yeah. Golden Gophers defense. That's good DC to pull over. Still not Jim Knowles. He's still not Jim Knowles. So I can't place that in the same category of look at the staff upgrade, that we've made here because, well, I just watched this guy go win a national championship. I mean, I'm sure plenty of your listeners out there know that I'm an Oregon guy, and I love Will Stein, Oregon's offensive coordinator. He got punked on January 1st in the Rose Bowl. Jim Knowles ran circles around him. That's just the whole staff across the board. Or that was my biggest takeaway from that game was, yeah, Oregon staff got worked, and that included Jim Knowles. He had a way better day than Will Stein. Why? Because he's really good. So, yeah, Knowles is the biggest kid. Like, I would still have high hopes. I think if Knowles were still at Ohio State, I'd have Penn State 11-1 instead of 12-0. But I think he's that valuable.
And that's what is not going to immediately show up in the analytics, anything like that. It's going to have to play out on the football field to show just how important of a move that was for Penn State to somehow upgrade a defense that has been consistently top 10 for the past few seasons. So now how do they stack up against the Big Ten? Because when you say they go 12-0, I think they can definitely go 12-0 as well. That means they have to beat Ohio State. So how do they match up against the Buckeyes? Your Oregon Ducks as well. And then are there any other sneaky teams in the Big Ten that maybe put a Penn State on upset notice? We're going to go through all of that and more coming up next here on this Locked On Crossover. And today's episode is brought to you by DripDrop. When I'm on top of my hydration, I notice everything works better. My energy, my mood, my focus. But getting enough fluids every day isn't always easy. That's why I've been loving DripDrop. DripDrop is doctor developed and scientifically proven for fast hydration. It uses the perfect balance of sodium electrolytes and glucose to help your body absorb fluids quickly, delivering 3 times those electrolytes and half the sugar of a leading sports drink. And if you don't want any sugar, they have 0 sugar options. I got the citrus variety pack because I like mixing it up. I want to try one flavor one day and then a different flavor the next and try to limit my sugar intake as well. So to get that flavor, to get that hydration all together in a powder packet that goes right into my water, that's great. And it boosts hydration. DripDrop is a go-to. And right now, DripDrop is offering Locked On listeners 20% off your first order. Just head over to DripDrop.com and use promo code LockedOnCollege. That is DripDrop.com, promo code LockedOnCollege for 20% off. Stock up now before the heat hits hard. So the Big Ten is really top-heavy. Penn State, Ohio State, and I think if Oregon figures out that 5th, 6th gear, they're a second-half team. They might peak at the right time going into the postseason because we want to talk about consistency and continuity with Penn State. You have Will Stein back because, you know, you're not breaking in a new offense. You're just breaking in a new quarterback, running back, majority of the offensive line. Wide receivers, Evan Stewart, unfortunately, out for the season.
Yeah,
it's
just that.
But that's still offensively a gifted team. They just need to gel at some point. The same thing with Ohio State. New quarterback, new offensive coordinator, right? Brian Hartline, first time OC. I know he's been there for a long time, but they held off on him for a while. He's
never been a play caller before, Zach.
Yeah,
has not done it. It's one of the reasons I think they lose to Texas in week 1.
Yes.
Am I supposed to pretend like Brian Hartline? I mean, maybe he is going to be that good. You tell me he's going to be at his peak as an OC, which he can totally be good at, of course. He's going to be at his peak, just firing on all cylinders right away, immediately. There's going to be no growth, no development, no progression. With a brand new quarterback, yeah, who's never played college football before. Like I'm supposed to believe that? I don't believe that.
So there's going to be growing pains with Oregon, with Ohio State, but these teams are still really good. It's their ceiling. They're not going to reach their ceiling, I don't think, until towards the end of the season. And then can you withstand how tough a Big Ten conference is now to a point where, okay, you can go 10-2 and not miss the playoff, because that's the thing. Those teams that don't withstand those 12-game schedules. But, I mean, that's besides the point. I'm not trying to imply that Ohio State and Oregon don't make the college football playoff, but we've seen some of the better teams never live up to their potential because they don't make it through a long season, whether that's college football or the NFL. So Penn State has all of that consistency, that continuity. There's no the only chemistry that Penn State would need to build is through the passing game. Go figure, once again, because you do lose Tyler Warren and you bring in Trevor Pena, Devontae Ross, Kyron Hudson. You're just going to need to get acclimated, but it's a lot easier to do when it's a third-year starting quarterback, same OC, entire offensive line is back for the most part, 2 superstar running backs. That's why Penn State should be favored to win the Big Ten in the regular season and the Big Ten title. And that's a synopsis of why they'd be better than Ohio State and Oregon. I imagine you agree with me that the Ohio State game is still going to be tougher than the Oregon one, especially where Penn State plays the Ducks. Earlier in the season, like I said, I do not want to play Oregon later on in the season. I'm glad that's game 4 for Penn State and not game 10, for example.
Yeah, game 4 at home off a bye, cross-country trip. That's a lot of advantages in a whiteout game. Although Penn State fans might not like me for this one, I actually, as an Oregon guy, would rather play that game in the whiteout than a big noon kickoff.
Oh, yeah.
I want no part of Oregon's football team kicking off at 9 a.m. Do you know, even if you go a couple days before, your body clock is not all the way adjusted. You're waking up you probably wake up a solid 3 to 4 hours before kickoff because you have to go have your team meal and then you have to bus to the stadium and then you go through warm up. You're probably looking at about 4 hours roughly. So every team does their logistics differently at Southern Utah. I think we're usually awake around 4 hours prior to kickoff. If it's an earlier kick. So I want no part for Oregon to play at 9 a.m. West Coast time. That hasn't gone well for West Coast teams. At least it didn't last year. And I don't. Yeah. So, it's not going to suddenly just, get really easy. But your point on Oregon is a really good one because their talent on their roster is really good. The experience just isn't there. But by the end of the season, when they, go through their tough stretch of November, I think it can be there and they can be a much better team. I mean, you look at, what they did last year. They went from struggling with Idaho and Boise State to in the middle of the year beating the future national champs, and Washington comes into town who it was not as good as Boise State last year but was certainly much better than Idaho, and Oregon beats the crap out of them. So I think that progression is there. I think the coaching staff has taken steps forward with how they approach game planning and game day execution and adjustments and whatnot over the last few years. And it's an interesting contrast with Oregon and Ohio State because they are different. And I think you could make this case readily about Ohio State that, hey, by the time they play Penn State at home, they're going to be a lot better than when they play Texas. I agree.
And they will.
Yeah, I fully agree. I just still think the advantage for Penn State with the coaching staff, with the roster all being there, I think they're going to find a way to get that game done. And I would feel even more confident if it was Penn State, Ohio State in week 2 or something of that nature. But, Ohio State doesn't have a ton of player continuity from last year. They're turning over a lot. They recruited at a high level. This is why. They are turning over both their coordinators. Oregon's returning both of their coordinators. Oregon's going into their 3rd straight season with the same trio: head coach, offensive coordinator, defensive coordinator.
Talk about continuity.
That is a rarity. It is a huge rarity, and I would be pretty surprised if it goes to a 4th. I think Will Stein will end up being a head coach in 2026 somewhere. I hope not, because I like him a lot as Oregon's OC. He's really good, but I wonder. The Ducks do at least get 4 games under their belt that they shouldn't have major problems winning to begin the season before they go and play Penn State. How prepared can the staff, that veteran, experienced staff, get this young, talented Oregon team ready, especially Dante Moore, to go to Penn State for their 5th straight game to start the year? We're going to find out. But I think that contrast between the two is fascinating. I'm glad you brought that up. And then you mentioned earlier, other teams that can kind of sneak up on everybody in the Big Ten. Do you remember who my preseason number 4 team is in the Big Ten Conference? My power rankings?
I didn't know there'd be a pop quiz. Well, because they don't. So Penn State doesn't play Illinois, but Was it Illinois? Or was
It is indeed the Illinois Fighting Illini. Who
so fortunately, they don't play them. Maybe
Yeah.
in the Big Ten championship. Maybe. I doubt it.
Yeah, and Illinois is my dark horse to make the Big Ten championship game.
Their schedule's just tough.
Dark horse. Their schedule does not work out as favorably as I would like. They do miss Penn State, but they've got Ohio State at home. They've got USC at home. If they can just beat Indiana on the road, and I think they will, you could look up and see Illinois at 10-2, and maybe that's enough to get your way to Indianapolis again this year. But I think the easy one to look at Penn State's schedule and say, boy, that might trip them up, Iowa. Iowa
at Kinnick, yeah.
Yeah, Iowa at Kinnick is upset special.
Especially right before Ohio State.
Yeah, you got to avoid the look-ahead factor. You've got to go on the road, and you're going to have a hostile environment against a program that has a very high floor, not the ceiling that a Penn State, Oregon, Ohio State have, or some other programs in the Big Ten like USC, Washington, and keep going down the list. But I think that game has always got upset potential. I feel that way for Oregon too. I think it's one of Oregon's.
That's anybody. That's not.
Yeah. I sent out a poll to my Locked On Ducks insiders the other day. If I pick Oregon to go 10-2 with a loss at Penn State, who do you think the other loss is going to be? Over 80% of those that responded said Iowa, and the second one was Washington because it's on the road. It's a rivalry game, but Iowa is the one that has people's attention. So. That's one of those games that from a narrative standpoint, Penn State always wins, right? They win the games they should. They lose the games they should. Yeah, exactly. They'll be favored in that game. So I do think they're going to find a way to win, and they just have more overall talent. I'm going to wait and see on Mark Gronowski. FCS to FBS jumps can go really well. They can go really poorly. And I don't quite know. I haven't checked out enough Gronowski film to feel strongly one way or the other. But frankly, with FCS game tape, it's really tough. It's
so top heavy. You can't get a good margin of how good is this guy in comparison to the competition.
Yeah, I call a lot of FCS football games every year for Southern Utah, and it's not that it isn't good, exciting, fun football that fans enjoy. It absolutely is. To say that walking by an FCS team as someone who's a 5'8.5" play-by-play announcer and podcaster feels the same as walking by a Big Ten team, nope. Those two things are not the same. This is just a majorly different caliber of athlete that you're dealing with. So I think the Iowa game is the one that stands out as like, if Penn State were to get tripped up where they shouldn't, that would be the one. But I'm sticking to my guns here, Seyko. I'm 12-0.
They're favored against everybody except Ohio State. So if you're going off of that measure, then Penn State's going to go at least 11.
Do we have an Ohio State line?
Thought it was 3.5, 4.5, depending on where you look. So it's in that ballpark. Hey, that's within a touchdown.
Free money. Free money. That's what I call. That's what I call that right there.
There was one other team that you did not mention that we're going to pick up with after the break that I think will get your attention when we discuss them. And then we're going to talk about scheduling those cupcakes and why Penn State and Indiana are not in the wrong. That is coming up next here on this Locked On Crossover. So we're going to talk scheduling cupcakes, but I want to get back to just analyzing the Big Ten. Spencer, there was one team that we focused on Iowa, and that makes a ton of sense. And we talked about a lot of other teams that Penn State just doesn't have to play this season until they either get to the college football playoff or even the Big Ten championship. The team that they do face, Nebraska. I'm surprised Nebraska. We're talking about teams that, hey, they could peak in the second half of the season. If Nebraska is able to go through the wear and tear of the season, I mean, some people are saying they could be undefeated by the time they get to Happy Valley.
Okay. Calm down.
I think that's crazy.
Calm down.
I'm not saying I agree with that. I'm saying there are select analysts that are really buying into Dylan Raiola and Matt Rule. I mean, he revitalized Temple, Baylor, of all places. He can win in college football. I believe that this Nebraska team will be good. And again, Dylan Raiola, as a former 5-star quarterback, if we're saying Dante Moore can do this, Julian Sain can do this, then Dylan Raiola can absolutely have that same type of season where he gets better. I think Nebraska's ceiling is one loss going into Penn State, and that's still very unlikely in my mind. But a two-loss Nebraska team, I think, really could give Penn State fits, especially with Matt Rule being a former Penn State player, former assistant coach on the staff. That one's personal for him. And if he can do anything to knock off Penn State, if they happen to lose to Ohio State, and then there's that second loss that would really shake things up for the Nittany Lions. Oh, to play spoiler as Matt Rule, that Nebraska game is going to be that Nebraska-Penn State game is going to be personal across the board.
Yeah, I have Nebraska going 9-3 this year. Make no mistake about it. That is a good team. The reason I didn't bring it up when we were talking about stumble spots for Penn State is it's at home. And
it's at home.
Nebraska, I think, can be a good team. And Raiola had a good true freshman season. Like, it sounds trivial. Leading them to a bowl game was such a big deal. Like, mentally for the program to just get over that hurdle, get it off your back, get rid of the cloud hanging over the program. When you get, okay, to finally get there and have a true freshman lead you there says a lot. And remember, that's a Nebraska team that started 5-1 a season ago. And then who did they lose to at home? My Illinois Fighting Illini. I'm just throwing it out there and such. So Nebraska is a team that I would like the upset pick more if I didn't think they stylistically looked a lot like Penn State. So they're going to try to go into Beaver Stadium, which was a Jeopardy clue I saw the other day. I got it right, don't worry. And I don't know that I trust Nebraska to go into Penn State and out-physical them to a win. I think that game will look a lot like the Illinois game last year. And, I liked the Illini a year ago, but, it could be kind of ugly, could be kind of low scoring. But are you ever really terrified that there's going to be an upset there? No. Final score of that game was 21-7, correct?
I just think Nebraska should get a little more respect. And so I agree with you. They don't win in a rock fight. If you get into a rock fight with this Penn State team, you are probably not winning more often than not.
Yeah, and maybe Dana Holgerson as the offensive coordinator for Nebraska opens things up a little bit more. But, Matt Rule teams, I think, are a little more defensively oriented. They want to be physical. They looked, frankly, like Wisconsin last year. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that. You can win a lot of football games doing that. And I just don't trust them to go into Happy Valley and out physical Penn State to a win on the road.
I definitely don't disagree with you. I just think they're a team. And I see the justification for people saying that USC is their toughest matchup. And that's at home. So Nebraska actually could be undefeated going into that Penn State game. I'm just saying, keep an eye on it. Keep an eye on it. The games that are easy to tackle at the beginning of the season for Penn State, it's going to be until the Oregon game, Nevada, FIU, FCS Villanova, Penn State. Everybody points to Indiana because Kurt Cignetti is going to the mic and saying, here's why I will take Penn State and Indiana side. Now, I get it. Indiana gets a bad rap because they are canceling games that they scheduled. That I do have an issue with. Just hold up, honor your agreement. Don't back out, that kind of thing. But James Franklin said this a while back, actually, that with the talks of conference expansion, that the non-conference schedule, you needed that once upon a time, the expanded college football playoff. So it's two of them together in conjunction with one another. Because when you needed to have the resume to get into a 4-team playoff, or maybe a 6-team playoff, we didn't know at the time a few years back, you needed that 10th, maybe 11th game that were Power 4 schedule boosters. You don't really need that now when 9 of your games in the Big Ten are legit. So I get it. I get it from the perspective of, as a fan, as spectators, we want to see the best matchups week in and week out. But for scheduling purposes, for Penn State, for anybody else, when there's a 12-team playoff, potentially a 14, 16, I've lost count of what we're headed for, but you don't need those grueling non-conference games anymore when you have 9 conference games, which are tough because of the expansion, the 12-team plus playoff. You have a lot more margin of error. You have a lot more wiggle room that you did not have before. So that is why Penn State and Indiana and other schools are doing this, and I don't disagree with them.
Well, I understand the logic. It's incredibly clear that the record looks a lot cleaner. We want regular season results to matter, something I agree with. I just want there to also be good games for fans to watch, because I try to be the most pro fan podcast in the college football space out there. So what I have a problem with is not that there are 2 games of the 3 that Penn State's going to roll. I just want 1. I want 1. I think every school should play an FCS, a Group of 5, and a Power 4. That should be their non-conference slate. They shouldn't set that schedule, by the way. The model that I have long advocated for is a 2-year cycling conference challenge. You'd even the conference, the number of members in each conference, and then, say we were starting this year and it was Big Ten versus SEC. Oregon would play Georgia. They'd go to Athens. Next year, Georgia comes to Oregon in Eugene. That is the end of that matchup. Now it rotates. The Big Ten then plays the Big 12. And let's say Penn State has won the Big Ten in 2026. So for 2027, they would play the Big 12 champion. Let's say it's Texas Tech. And they would do a 2-year home and home. And you would keep going down the list. So something along those lines is what I would like to see college football do. We're not anywhere close to that. And schools controlling their non-conference scheduling results in exactly this.
Yes.
I do believe the SEC should play 9 conference games. I'm fully on board with that. And for the love of all that is holy, get the FCS game out of week 13. It's so ridiculous. 12, 13, whatever it is, second to last week of the regular season. Get it out of there. Put it in before conference play like everybody else. You don't get a half bye while everyone else is playing actual conference games in the midst of a playoff hunt. It's completely
penalize them for it.
Completely and utterly ridiculous. Well, I think the playoff committee kind of did last year when they looked at the SEC 9-3 and they were like, sorry, no, you don't. You've got losses on there that are not good, and we're not going to just give you benefit of the doubt. I hope they continue with that particular mindset. So, I don't like that Penn State schedule is a job. I don't think the fans like it, frankly. No, do you like having do you like not having an actual football game that excites you to look forward to until September 27th? Because that's the reality for Penn State. Is they're going 3 cupcakes, a bye, and then Oregon. So everybody else's season starts August 30th, 29th, 31st, and Penn State fans can tune out until September 27th. Because I can tell you right now, they're going to win all those games by a bunch of points, then they're going to have a bye, and then things will get underway. I want more good college football games in the regular season. Sue me, Seyko.
I want that too. But I want it to be uniform. I don't want some schools to have tough schedules and some schools to have easy schedules. But I also can't blame Penn State and Indiana for doing what is best for them and understanding that the Big Ten schedule alone is now enough to have a solid resume, if you do well, to get you into the college football playoff. So that is where we will put a lid on things in this Locked On crossover. He is Spencer McLaughlin of Locked On College Football and Locked On Ducks. My name is Zach Seyko, the host of Locked On Nittany Lions. So you get daily content around the entirety of college football with Spencer and the Oregon Ducks over here with the Penn State Nittany Lions. Make sure you become an everydayer and subscribe to the YouTube channels and wherever you get your podcasts so you don't miss out on those conversations